Welcome to Culture A, everyone. Thank you for listening in. On today's show, I have Abe Seksek, who joins me to discuss startups, scaling, and the HR connection. And let me just give you a quick introduction to who Abe is. He's not directly from the HR community, which I know is strange for this podcast, but his extensive experience in scaling startups and driving innovation and co-founding HR software solution companies really does give him a very unique perspective on the challenges and the opportunities that HR professionals face in a very rapidly evolving digital world. His journey from leading operations at major organizations to spearheading HR solutions underscores the intersection of operational excellence and human resources. This episode will definitely give you a very fresh perspective on how HR can drive innovation, scalability, and operational efficiency in any organization. Abe, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Sarah. It's always good to see you.
It's good to see you too. I haven't seen you in a very long time.
Yeah.
Abe and I know each other from a different world. We used to work together back in the day, so it's really nice to have you on.
Thank you for having me again. And it is. I've heard of a couple of your episodes, and I think let's hope I add some value to some of your users.
I'm sure you're going to add some value. I want to jump into the conversation, okay?
Let's do
So
this.
as I explained, you're not typically from the HR community, but you've had your hand in the HR world since the start of your career, pretty much.
Yes.
So you've been at the helm of startups and accelerator programs. From an HR perspective, okay, what would you say is the most crucial element in fostering kind of an innovative culture and then scaling it successfully?
So, from my experience, and let me just tell you, either from I started in the corporate life as well, but even in what I do right now with startups is we are always founder driven. So we're always looking for that person that has the right skill set, and the right skill set doesn't mean a certain talent or something, but they have to have a full rounded experience. And when you're starting a business, you have to be the HR person, you have to be the finance person, you have to be all of that. So, but HR and people is such an important part of anybody who's starting up a journey, right? So that person needs to outline their vision. They need to outline exactly, and they need to know their weaknesses and strengths because they need to hire people that address those blind spots. And you see a lot of startups that fail, and it's a part of life, right? Is people that hire identical copies of themselves. So they don't address the elephant in the room. They hire more people that are in the same wavelength, at least on a wavelength of thinking or the way how they do things. And we see that a lot in our companies. So going back to that conversation, we are really founder led, and when we do some of our investments, when we look for anybody to come in, and the founder led mentality is usually good founders come in and they want to know how to build a culture, but they already have an idea what kind of culture they want. So they ask people in other organizations, how do I find these two people that I am really weak in their skill sets, but really match where we need to go? And managing that is really, really difficult. And that's why the startup rate of success is low. Now, obviously, I'm a big startup guy and I love people to get up and create as much companies as possible, but it's not all. The winning formula is finding that right culture fit, plus addressing anything that you need to, when it comes to blind spots, and making sure that you cover all these blind spots.
So, look, I wanted to actually bring this up because you are the person who sees so many startups. You see individuals who are so excited about the ideas that they have and they really want to create. And I understand the passion that kind of goes behind a lot of these founders and what they're trying to build.
Sure.
And as you said, a lot of them try to hire copies of themselves. How do you consult? If you feel like that's maybe not the right direction, if they need something that they don't necessarily have themselves that can add value to their organization, do you consult with them on that?
So we do sit with like everybody, that especially in our portfolios or our programs, to make sure we are like the outside in look on the company, and we say, you haven't addressed this or that issue. So sometimes we implement some tools. We like we've like one of the examples I can give you is we worked with a couple of tools that measure culture, like a culture amp, these softwares that are online.
Okay.
What was the other one? Just to measure, the net promoter score of how, or the health of the culture in the company and stuff like that. And then usually the results are, a lot of times when the first time we run this, it's always surprising, especially to the founder, because the founder has usually a rosy vision of what's happening,
Right.
and they get shocked about small things like, sometimes it's a lack of direction, while the founder is like, well, I've been very open and communicate, but maybe I'm, so we've actually had a lot of examples where the founders were maybe too open.
Okay.
You get what I'm saying? Like because they speak their mind, so it confuses people, right? But he was trying to be transparent, yet people, they're like, no, but you told us that you're going this way, and that is also something that we help a lot of our companies and a lot of our founders saying, yes, it's you have to be transparent, but with a direction, like, because
Right.
some people are not sitting in your room every single day, so they don't know how that conversation led to. And so that was one of the things. So tools do play a big part of it, as well as in my past, when we built this ATS, an applicant tracking system called Caval, and now it's called Zen ATS. They rebranded after I left, and a part of it was because when we were looking at these tools, especially if you look at the big global tools like Workable or Greenhouse or those big ones, there was always in MENA a culture element that these tools were not very culture relevant. I'll give you an example. Like when we built Zen HR, we knew that the visa application in GCC or anywhere in this side of the world was a big part of the recruitment. Sometimes you hire and then they don't get approved for a visa, right?
Right.
And so we started building stuff like that, and suddenly we started getting a lot more business because people were very, like, it was very relevant to them because they knew this was a part of the process, you know what I mean, and stuff like that. So so tooling became a very important part of everything that we do. We had to make sure that I don't want to waste my time and effort in, let's say, recruiting this great talent, but we knew that wasn't going to get approval, or we didn't have quota at that time, or whatever, you know what I mean, or they don't meet certain criterias, and then we have to get creative hiring them as a consultant, or
Right.
so. And then the third thing I think as well with all these startups is because founders don't know labor laws, and like they think, oh, we can get somebody, and then after 3 weeks we let them go, and I'm like, no, like if you're gonna get them, that, like, hire them as a contractor, hire them as a, like, I mean,
Right.
like the tooling, the process, the knowledge is the three things in HR that really helps the founder. And then on top of that, you throw the culture layer, it becomes a real big task for the founders, and that's why we come in and help them with all of these little things.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. It's much more clear actually now. Thank you. Okay, you touched on Zen HR. I want to kind of dive into that a little bit. Okay, so for those of you who are listening, Abe co-founded and was CEO of
Zen
Zen
HR.
HR. Zen HR is a software solutions company, and I think the aim behind what I've seen online for Zen HR is that you want to help HR departments reach a state of Zen, which I've never, if I'm honest with you, I have never associated the words Zen and HR. Okay, but interesting. Can you help me to understand, or can you help our listeners to understand maybe a challenge that you faced in achieving this Zen, and how you overcame it?
So I'll tell you how the whole Zen thing
Okay,
happened.
yeah.
Actually,
Tell me about Zen. Yeah.
so I was a part of a company called Akhtabut.com. Akhtabut.com was one of the early job boards in MENA, and I think they're number one in a couple of markets to this day. Actually, in the smaller markets like Jordan
They were
and
very strong. They were very, very strong.
they were, and then when we walked in and we said, "Listen, what can we do more for HR?" And then we spoke to a lot of our clients at that time who were recruiters and HR managers. Keep in mind, a lot of HR back then, it's gotten much better, but back then, HR was usually a very weak function in a company because it was just payroll, attendance, like very basic. And then, when we started talking to these HR managers, they said, well, most of our most of our things are on sheets, spreadsheets, paper. So how can we automate that? And we can't afford to go out and buy, softwares like like an ERP, like an Oracle or a SAP or any of those softwares that were out there. And then we said, you know what, we're gonna give you a very. Then we started thinking, okay, we have like 30,000 HR managers on this platform that are using it to post for jobs. How about we build you something just to manage your employees? And most of these companies had like 10 to 50 employees. So they were
Okay.
small corporations. So then every country we landed, we asked them what was the most important thing for them. In the UAE, it was payroll that was either WPS certified because that's the workforce management, I think, protocol. Plus, they wanted a repository of like identifications and passports and IDs, and because that was important because HR kept plus producing documents like NOCs and
Right.
like stuff that are very relevant to this market, while Jordan wanted integration with attendance system or very basic stuff like that. So we had to build all these things, and then from there we started coming up with other tools. And so even if you look at Zen HR, their slogan is from acquire to retire, because they use the job board to acquire talent that's integrated directly into our ATS.
Okay.
And then from there, there's a testing solution. And then once they pass, they go into the Zen HR system, and then they retire or they resign or whatever. So we address the whole really value chain of HR through there with a local first approach of what's happening on the ground in the region. You know what I mean? They're only operating, I think, in 4 or 5 countries. To say, I left them 5 years ago, but I know they're up to a lot of things, and they've done a lot of integrations with, a lot of the other software. But I think that's something that we really touched on, is to really help these small mom and pop shop / SMEs really build up their HR capacity, and that's why it was there. And there's a knowledge section where people can ask about the labor law, because there's a lot of things there that people don't know. They
Right.
think HR is just paying people and firing and hiring people, right?
Right. There's a misconception.
Yeah.
They don't know about. Yeah, it's completely true. And actually, one of the reasons I wanted to bring light to the entire HR community through this podcast. Would you say that the challenge that you had with Zen HR was the fact that each like geography had a different challenge that you had to address? Because if you're going in and asking them, what can we help you with? Was that it? That it was so different?
It was. And everybody had a certain challenge because they wanted to do things the way they've been taught to do it.
Okay, yeah.
And then but then we would say no, like this is the best practice in your city, in your country. You know what I mean? Like I'll give you an example. Like there was I'm not going to mention the city that we everybody mentioned that I would like people to have geofencing on the app. What does that mean? That means they can log in as if that they're working in a certain area. Like I can't log in from home; it'll not
Okay.
let me because you're not technically in the same area or the premise of work, or that you submit that you're working from home. But back then, there wasn't really that
Yeah, it was different.
it was different,
Yeah.
right? So we had to make exceptions. So we had to build stuff like that according to, and it's not because one customer told me build this, I'd build it. No, I would have to get, like, I'd speak to 50 customers, and like if 30 said, well, then that means this is a priority.
Right. It has to be like a common
Yeah,
challenge.
and so and we used to start seeing that a lot. Like in UAE, out of the 100 people we surveyed, 98 people said it has to be the workforce payroll management certified. So that was like the number one priority. I think I had the whole team just build that for 2 weeks until we get it up in there, and then they started asking for other things, and then different people have different but also surveying HR people was a challenge because you can't go to any people and say, what do you want? Because either they would say everything or nothing, but no, they weren't. So it was more like, do you like this or do you like that?
Yeah.
And that's how it swayed the whole conversations, right? So and believe me, like when they started seeing it visually, they're like, oh no, we want this.
Yeah.
And it was
started
almost
to make
unanimous
sense.
always to see sort of stuff. It was a very interesting experience. It was 2.5 years of us getting to somewhere very comfortable. We can walk in and say, yeah, we have this. Oh, this is on a pipeline. But we didn't, like, after 2 years, we stopped hearing weird, like
Started to normalize a bit.
yeah, like they're like, okay, now I get it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Especially certain, like calendars. When we go to Saudi, they don't use this calendar; they use that calendar, and it was, we had some issues with both calendars. But there was a lot of other stories that for a later podcast.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
Okay. Let's shift over to Crystal Call. Okay. You led operations there, and you were leading operations across multiple cities. Just briefly, can you inform our listeners what Crystal Call is?
Okay. So Crystal Call, well, we started this company in 2007. It was, it's what we call a BPO, an automation company. It's a business process outsourcing, which means we build call centers and data entry centers, plus anything that needs to be automated. And Crystal today has around 2,500 employees.
Okay.
So it's not a small organization, around that, give or take, and is actually available in multiple countries. And so I came in as head of operations, or the CEO at that time, and founder. And what we did was I was in charge of 4 major things, and 3 of them were HR based.
Okay.
So I was in charge of HR and recruitment. That was a big part of, there's a whole floor, I think, just dedicated to interviewing and getting people in, and then there's training. I was in charge of training, so building the content and not only onboarding training, but refreshing training, client training, and upskill training. Because and I'll tell you something that we did that I thought was one of the major successes at Crystal. We created an internal internship program for people to move from certain departments to another, and it's usually so it's a monster call center, right? With all the support units, and we would only hire people to come into the call center, and then if they prove themselves over 3 months, then they can apply to this. I called it CAP at that time. It's Crystal's accelerated program.
Okay.
Where people, let's say we had a lot of fresh graduates come in with like an accounting degree or an IT degree or some kind of other degree, and then we would say, okay, how about you try accounting for a month? So we'd put them in accounting,
Like a rotational program.
Yeah, it's a rotational program, and then from there, we would keep an eye on these candidates, and then from there, whenever there would be an opening in accounting, we say, okay, this person did really well, let's just move them there, and it gave people a career track. And then obviously also the team leaders, the supervisors, the managers, all were homegrown.
Okay.
So now we didn't have to have that whole learning curve that people needed to learn. So when people were promoted, within a week, they were like at 100%. While when you bring people in, it takes you around 2 to 3 months to just understand, and who do I go for this issue and who do I go to that.
There's a learning curve. Yeah,
Exactly.
definitely. Yeah.
And then the third thing that I was in charge of was quality control, which
Okay.
was another like very big part of the HR. So we had something in the company where you can earn up to another 2 to 3 salaries a year by meeting certain criterias.
Okay.
So if you
From a
were
performance perspective?
from a
Okay.
performance perspective, and
Okay.
because the call centers and these automation jobs were very data driven, so we say, oh, okay, Abe, you're in the top 90 percentile of quality, you took this many calls, so you're eligible for another salary after 3 months, and stuff like that. So retention and attrition were retention was increased, and attrition was like the global industry standards around 30% for attrition for cost. It's pretty high.
Yeah, that's really high.
Because it's a very, people like,
It's the nature of the role, though. I understand that. It differs. Yeah.
yeah. And Crystal, for the 7 years I was there, was under 9%.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
we were doing something right. And but I was there when they were almost 700-800 people. So maybe now the number now has jumped up to like 13-14%, but they're still trying to add more of these programs to keep people in their seats. And it's very interesting when you build such programs and you have to keep tweaking them, because you really need to keep talking to the people on the ground, saying
What's working?
what's working and what's not. Sometimes,
Right.
And I've learned something myself is never, work with your heart, but never trust it, kind of thing. Because if you're in love with such a program, but it's not working, you just let it die. You know what I'm saying?
Let it go.
just it can go. You know what I'm saying? And we had to kill off a couple of things, like certain departments never wanted these people to come in, and we stopped fighting it. We just said, you know what?
Let it die.
Let it die.
Just let it die. I like that. That's
You know,
really
so-
actually hilarious.
Yeah.